Hello, this is Sabina at Cross Keys Crafts. Today with the Visible Image Artist Trading Card Swap for July, and the theme of this month is the holiday season. And Visible Image said they'll leave it to us whether we would like to make it holiday as in the American holiday Christmas, because after all July in the paper crafting world is we make early Christmas cards, but I'm going to stick with the actual holiday theme, and I'm going to use this stamp set today at the beach, which has got all these lovely shells and some beach themed sentiments. So I want to work with that today. And for the card base, I have decided to create a water and wave theme with a bit of a beach, and I would like to make my own texture paste for that. I have done it once before. I can't remember quite the recipe, but I just wing it now, and I'm just going to make this with you. And all you need for that is some talcum powder. I've had this one for years. They keep, I think you can actually use corn flour as well, baking powder, any sort of powder, but it's nice to have a talcum powder that even smells nice. I'm going to be using a bit of my gesso primer, but that is not a must. You can also put in some white acrylic paint. That would work. And then I've got some PVA glue just to make it stick to the card base. And as I said, I'm winging it. I'm deciding on the texture about how much I need of everything. So I'm starting with a PVA glue. Sorry, because it's a big bottle, I might be going off screen a little bit. So I don't need much, so I don't want to have too much in there. So that's about 1 tablespoon, 2 tablespoons maybe. That will be enough. I'm just using an old yogurt pot because then I can dispose of that later if I don't need it. But if you want to make a batch of it and keep it like in a jam jar, you could do that as well. So then the gesso primer, I'd say half of the amount you have got in there of the glue. So very roughly, I think once I mix it, I know if I need any more. And then the same amount of the talcum powder, which will get a bit messy. I think I'll move my camera out of the way a bit so I won't dust into this. So let me just do that a bit off screen. Sorry about that, but I don't really want to mess it up. But it's not too dusty, but just a little bit. So I'm just moving this back now. So once I stir it, I can see what consistency this has got. And I've never had shop bought texture paste, so I'm not even sure what consistency they have got. But I think with this one I need a bit more talcum powder in this. So let me just move this out of the way again. So I had about 1 tablespoon of this in it. So just putting another one in. If you wanted to, you could Google recipes and see what people suggest. I'm not using this through a stencil, so it doesn't really matter if this one's a bit thinner. If you want to use stencils, you need to have a certain thickness for you to be able to actually move that through the stencils, but without it sticking too much. I think I'm happy with this. This is like just show you, like a really, really heavy cream. So I think this will be enough. So I'm getting a spatula out now, which I have forgotten to get ready, and I'm going to get my card base, and then I'll show you how I'm going to apply this. So I've got a 300 GSM card base. I always like to leave mine bigger than the actual piece I need. I only need the 2.5 by 3.5 ATC, and then I will use the rest for the greeting card I send with it. And all I'm going to do now is I'm going to put some of it here at the bottom, and you can see the consistency now. So, and I'm just going to use this and spread this out. So I haven't done this before, so it's actually quite thick, but the thicker it is, I think the better it will dry. I might have to apply a bit more just to be able to maneuver it around a bit more and get the texture, or the what can I say, the movement I want in this. So my idea is just to move it around like a wave would move when it hits the shore. It is quite thick at the moment, so I'm spreading it out a bit more. Because one thing I'm worried about is if it's too thick, that it'll crack when I try to cut it. So I'm now moving my spatula along the front there. Just like in waves, just to get this sort of movement. I'm hoping that it will actually dry a bit thinner, because I think when the moisture goes out, it will be not as thick. So what you could do if you wanted to beforehand is, I want these to stay white as you would have the foam, and I want to dye this afterwards, but you could add some acrylic paint, some blue acrylic paint to the texture paste and dye this beforehand. So I think this will be fine as it is. I'm trying to get this really even because I want to put some sand here later, and I'm just thinking whether I need to apply that first just to get the edge right. I think I'll do that now, because what I have planned for this bit for the beach, I could apply some glue here, put some actual sand down, but I discovered the other day when I was repainting our front door that you can actually use sandpaper. So I'm going to get that ready now. I'm going to apply this now, and then I'm just going to sort out this edge. I have got this assorted pack of sandpaper from B&M for £3. It's 20 pieces, and they've got different coarsenesses in there, and I think I'll use either the fine or the extra fine sheet. And I'll tell you why. I had a coarse sheet the other day, and I realised that the coarse sheet, it's bound to crack on the front, just the way the pieces here, the whatever you call them, sand sort of sits on top. But I think the fine one is really nice. Don't know if you can see this. This has even got a few little speckles. I think that'll do me. So what I'm doing is I'm just going to tear this very randomly, as you would at the edge there, just like this. And I'm going to glue this down on the front here, and then I just sort out the edge. So I'm just using a standard glue here, just universal clear glue. Oh, as always, this one's stuck. Bear with me whilst I get a glue. Yeah, I'm using this one instead. It's a Creative Craft Products double-ended glue pen. That'll do. As I said, any glue is fine. So I'm getting as close as I can to the edge here. Although it shouldn't really matter because that's got glue in it as well, so just overlapping that a little bit. And then I just use my paste again, and I just move the paste over the edge there, because that's what you would naturally have. You would have the water going over the sand. I think I'll apply just a bit more over the edge there, just to be able to move it around. So if you want to recreate this, put down your sandpaper first. And I'll just redo these. But because it's so liquid, it just actually melts very nicely and shows, makes some imperfections disappear. So hope you can see this. So I'm going to leave this now to dry. Just see if I make this a bit thinner. As I said, I'm not quite sure how thin it dries and how easy it is to cut this. There's a few bubbles there. Get rid of those. Okay, so I'll leave this to dry. I don't want to hit it with a heat gun. I don't know what the heat gun does to it, although I could imagine that if you blow it, you could get another good texture. Should I just try that? I've seen people move around acrylic, what's it called, resin, with a heat gun, so I might just do that as a trial run, and I'll be back in a sec. So apologies in advance for the noise. I moved the camera as high up as I could and zoomed in, so I'm just putting it on my low setting first and see what happens. But that doesn't move anything around, so I put it on the high setting. So that doesn't do anything, it doesn't shift anything. It might actually even have smoothed something out, but it seems to dry it a bit, so I think I'll do this off camera now just to move on the process a bit more. So I haven't dried it completely. I tested it on the edge there. It's still quite wet actually, but it created a very interesting texture. I think this will be really nice once it is dry. I'm putting this aside now. As I said, I'm conscious that it might crack. It's also wobbled quite a bit, warped quite a bit. So I see what I can do with it, and I hope it doesn't crack in the post. I might have to put in some bubble wrap with the card, but I think this looks really, really cool. So I just can only encourage you to have a go at this, play around with this. As I said, if it turns out nice, it'll be really, really cool. So I set this aside now, and I think I'll leave this now for 24 hours. Maybe have a look at it again tonight, but I definitely leave this to set, and I'll start now on the shells. So I just wanted to show you, I'm not wasting the rest of this. I just covered it, and I can use it on a different project later. I might actually try it, whether it works with a stencil. That might be quite useful. But always remember, because it's got a lot of glue in it, when you use it with a stencil, wash your stencil straight away afterwards, so you won't have any residue left on that. So for the shells, I want to create some background colour for me to stamp on. And I'm using this mixed media paper. I got this from the range, I think. It is not very good for watercolour and anything, because it's got this sort of greyish texture, especially when you paint on it. But I think it would be very good for this project. And it says it's 300 GSM, but it feels thinner than the card base I have just worked on, which sometimes is a bit weird, because I think, 300 GSM should be 300 GSM, but never mind. So I have got a tile here on the side. You can use an acrylic block. And let me just move this over just a little bit. And I have got different water reactive inks ready. I've got the Distress Oxide Vintage Photo and Carved Pumpkin. I have got the Lavinia Elements Truffle and Sundance. And I've got my Memento Desert Sand. Reason being is when you see shells, they're not just white or brown or beige. They've got speckles on them. They've got sometimes some streaks of colour on them. So I want to recreate that just on this card base, and then I want to stamp the shells on this and then cut them out. So my idea is just to get some colour down, and I'm starting, I think, with the yellow. So all I'm doing is I'm just putting a bit of ink on the block here. I'm spraying some water on here, and then I'm just using my fan brush, just putting it in here, and then dabbing this, hoping that it's wet enough for the speckles to come off. Oh, these are very fine. I need more ink, I think. I'll tell you what I'll do with this instead then. I'm going to put some streaks down of colour. You see what I mean? And it looks a bit funny at the moment, but once when it all comes together, this will be a nice effect. So I think that'll do me for this one now. So I will now go in with the travel and try the same again with the water speckles. That might show a bit more. Yeah. Be careful if you've got anything on your desk that you don't want to be covered in paint. I hope the camera picks the speckles up. They're very fine, and it depends on how much water you use, how fine they are. But I really like these fine speckles. And again, I might just use a finer brush, just thinking. Tell you what, just spotting here my stencil brushes. I think I'll just dab them into there and see if I can create any effect with that. Not a lot, just a little bit. So I'm doing the same with the carved pumpkin, but I just really want a hint of the orange. Because I know this is very, very vibrant. Don't know if you've seen my recent videos about the dinkles. I could use those as well, but I want to use the dinkles on the water side, so just leaving this here. And also, I hadn't cleaned my tile, and I've got some residue of my stickers on there, so I might end up with a few glittery bits on here. I'm actually quite a lazy crafter sometimes. I don't like cleaning up, so let's see if I can wipe those off now. So, yeah, and I'm not quite sure how this will show. I presume it's water reactive. It doesn't actually say. It might just be a stamping ink. I just bought this originally for, it says desert sand, to create sand effect. I think this will be too light. So let's see again if I can put this on there, yeah. So it's a bit of a dull day today, so I'm not quite sure how the camera picks this up. As I said, it looks weird now, but once I've stamped onto it, I think this will all come together. So, and I think with a vintage photo, I will just do some ink blending rather than speckles. I'm not quite sure yet how. Let me have a quick think. Yes, I've just decided I'm going to have half of this with a vintage photo, so I can have a few darker shells, and with the others I'll leave them with a white background. So I'm just using my ink blending brush. I just want a light colour. So just with a light hand, just going over this here. So that will just give me some variation, I think, in the shells. And I will also, or might also, use this again once I have stamped the shells. So again, I'm leaving this to dry for a moment, and then I'm going to do the stamping. So I have heat set this piece of paper with my heat tool, actually, because I decided to, rather than stamp these just in black, I decided to use my copper embossing powder, and for that your paper needs to be really, really dry so you don't have any residue. And I shouldn't have done that because I've just used my anti-static powder tool, so I shall be using that again. Just make sure I've got no residue on here. And I've already put my stamps on here. I've got the shells at the bottom and I've got my starfish at the top, and I'm using my Versamark stamp pad to just ink these all up. Making sure I get good coverage. Just getting my pressure tool here. If I say pressure tool, if you haven't seen this yet, it's just a doorknob with a piece of felt underneath. But it really helps to get even pressure on the stamps. So this one's really difficult to see now. I hope it worked. So I'm just taking this out. Got a piece of paper here on the side because this is just a small box. Normally I've got bigger boxes for the more frequent, or the powders I use more frequently. Can't even remember now where I stamped everything, so I'm just using the whole lot, or almost the whole lot. And yeah, there's a bit missing there on the edge. Give it a bit of dab. Yeah, there we go. That will look really nice. Looks a bit like a bit of double stamping there, but I can either use a brush on that, but because I will die cut them anyway, it doesn't matter. And to be honest, I wasn't aware how thick the powder actually sits on there. I thought you would see more of the texture underneath. You don't actually, so I might have to redo that afterwards. You can see it here and a bit here, but not too much. But it doesn't matter at the current point. So I'm just setting it aside, and I'm going to heat set this. Again, I said that in another video, I'm going to heat set this from the bottom first, just so I don't blow away the powder, and I'm setting it with a heat first before I heat set it again from the top. So a little tip for heat setting: make sure you don't keep it in one place for too long. It can actually burn the paper, which is okay if it's from the back, and because it's a thicker paper it takes a bit longer as well, but it will make your embossing powder matte. It won't shine as much if your heat tool is too hot in one spot. So these are all set now. I'm fairly pleased with it, but I have to go back in with a colour because not much of the speckles or stripes are actually visible. I know this is a bit where I went over it with a vintage photo, but still I have to go back into some areas. But just to make use of the speckled background, I'm going to stamp the more open shells again, but this time just in brown. So I'm going to be using my VersaFlying Clear Pine Cone, and I just want to have a few that are not heat embossed where I can hopefully see the speckles a bit more. So I shall do this off screen, and then I shall fussy cut them all. And yeah, as I said, I will ink these up a bit more. I think I'll do that off camera as well, and I will give this one a bit of a bit of colour as well. You can do this by either just, as you've seen before, watering down your inks, or you can just use your ink blending brushes over this. I know I want to go in with this with the orange again, with a carved pumpkin, and these I'll have a look what I do with these. I have used my orange ink blending brush. I didn't top it up, I just used it as it was and put some residue over the two starfish, although this one doesn't have a lot of background colour to actually hold this. But for these shells, because the streaks almost disappeared, I've just used my what's it called, truffle, Lavinia Elements truffle again, with my fan brush with some water, and I'm just going over this now in the direction of those shells. So just to give them some sort of structure or pattern. This one I think I'm going sideways. And I think I will do that again in a different colour. Just thinking, or maybe just some specks of a different colour, just to set these off a little bit. And I think I'll do the same with the ones I have just stamped with the Versifying Clair. So these on the lighter background shows actually a bit more. So I will put a disclaimer in the video to maybe skip the first step and just do this background afterwards, because you can actually see where you need this. So as I said, I will quickly do the speckles. I'll do this off camera now, and then I will fussy cut these. The speckles didn't really work with this one either because they're too small, so I just ended up using my fan brush and just dabbing a pattern onto the shells like that, and that seemed to work. So that just as a disclaimer. So it's been about 10 hours since I started creating the sea part here in the morning, and I think you can see where it's still wet a little bit, but I've cut a little piece off to have a trial run to actually use some ink on this surface. And my thought was, now whilst I've got it in this state, I think I apply the ink now and then leave the rest to dry overnight, so when I come back to this card in the morning, this will be all dried through, and then I can cut it apart. So what I've decided to use for the backgrounds is my Lavinia Dinkles. I've got the blue dragon and I've got the sea blue here. I've just had a trial run with the sea blue, but I'm sure I'll put some blue dragon in it as well. And I'm just using my tile again on this side. I'm putting my Dinkles onto the cardstock here. Let me just off camera try to get these pins out. So I will just put a bit of powder on. I'm just mixing them as they are. I'm adding some water, pouring this rather than spraying it this time. You can see how it already mixes there. This is very high pigmented. So, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my cardstock. I'm just along the edge here where I've got the wavy line, I'm just applying this here with my fan brush. I might have to get a different brush actually, because this one doesn't want to fan properly. Don't know if it's got any residue of any other substances like glue on this one here. So I hope you can see what I'm doing. It's very easy to apply. So this is a fairly dry application, if I can call it that, although it's liquid. It's not too watered down, But I think I'm going to apply a bit more water now to be able to run it across the line here, so it looks a bit more natural. So just see if I can apply that without spraying this too much. So I've got a smaller brush here, and I just want to follow now the wavy lines I have here. So I think I'm just going across to this line here where I've got a more solid or more sort of a raised edge. Because it's a bit watered down, it's easier to spread out than before. It's actually quite nice to have the thinner layer because it looks more natural, because when the water hits the shore, it does have, it's, you know, it's like deeper blue on the one end and then it gets lighter on the other. I think I will just get a bit away, rid of the streaks here that run that way and just spread it out a little bit like this. Could always go in with another colour if you wanted to. So, and with this, with the edge now, I'm trying to get in between now a little bit and just fill this in a little bit without it colouring over. And let me just raise this a little bit. The texture now actually gives me a hint of where I can apply the ink, and the sort of creased bits, I'll leave them on the top and just try to colour it in where it's a bit smoother. I will be covering some of it anyway, so I'm not too fussed about it being too precise. Just contemplating whether this is enough. I think I will go in with a bit of water. I'll risk spraying it on just to move it about just a bit more. I think this will give a bit more natural look to this. There's quite a bit of water, so I'm just getting some tissue to mop it up a little bit. And it's now actually running onto the surface here, which I didn't want. Yeah, I like it now. So it gives a very natural look, I think, to the sea. I will add a bit more water here just to get rid of these brush strokes. Being conscious here, I've just dabbed this bit where it's still a bit wet with the glue, so see if I can paint over that. Just using the excess here to colour this in. As you can see, I'm not really sure what I'm doing. I'm just going along with the process because that's the fun of being creative. I hope you can see this now. Yeah, I'm leaving this now to dry thoroughly till the morning, and then I will cut my ATC from this and my front panel for the greeting card. Okay, it has been 48 hours since I last worked on this card, and because I wanted this to dry properly, I have since put it through the die cutting machine just to flatten it out a little bit. What I did forget though, and you can see this here, is that my sandpaper was overlapping a bit before, so I've got this little edge from when I put it through the die cutting machine to flatten it, and this is why afterwards I put a little strip here on the back just to get it to the same height. I'm not too fussed about this though, because I had already planned to put a frame on the front here, So this, by the way, this is a piece I'm using for the greeting card. This is the ATC. And I've cut this frame with my nesting dies, just took two of them together, and this sits on here very nicely, so I will glue this down in a moment. I've also fussy cut all the shells. I don't enjoy this. I'm looking forward to when Visible Image hopefully release some dies to go with these, somewhat easier obviously than the others. So I will arrange these in a certain way. I will pick some of these to go on the ATC and some of them will go on here. I've also stamped a sentiment from the stamp set, but I'm not quite sure yet where to set this down. What I do know though is that I want to tear the edges. If you have been following me for a while, you've seen me do this before. All you need to do for that is you need to take a metal ruler and make sure this is straight on your card base and that you set down the metal ruler straight. I can actually see on the other side that it's straight. And the bit that you want to tear off, this is the one that you actually lift up and tear. So just along the edge, I'm tearing this up. This is actually one I've used before. I just used the back again. So same on the other side. Just making sure it is straight. I just want to go right above. I just moved it there. Right above the sentiment. I don't want to have too much of an edge. And again, just tear this bit upwards. And your sentiment will stay flat and won't tear at all because you're keeping this in place. So I'm not tearing the end bits yet because I'm not quite sure where I want to arrange this. Ideally I will have the shells at the bottom here, and then this would allow me to basically put this on the top. And I think what I will do is I just tear this end off, and then I cut this one off either with this edge here or this edge here. I'll have a think about that. So I don't think I will put you through watching me glue these down. I think I'll just do this off camera and show you and maybe talk you through how I have arranged them. So I'll be back in a moment with the finished card and ATC. Oh, one thing I forgot. I will use my ink blending brush on the edges here to get rid of the wide edge here. So I will just use my truffle again. I won't ink my blending brushes on, just to get rid of that harshness, because I just realized when I set it down you can see this there, and I don't want this. You can also use an alcohol marker or any other sort of pen, but I find that blending brushes work best. So here they are, my finished ATC and my greeting card. I always struggle a bit how to utilize the space best. I wanted to keep most of the background because I really like the texture of the glue and the paste I created. So I didn't want to cover it too much, but I also found there was too much blue here, so I just popped this shell here on the top. I had contemplated stamping on it, but then I didn't want to risk any mess, so I just left it at this now, and I think it's nice enough, even though the shells are floating a little bit at the top there. With the greeting card, I have layered a few stamps there. I have mixed the non-embossed ones with the embossed ones, and yeah, I think this is really nice. I quite like it. Some of these are floating a bit because of the different layers here, but I'm fine with that. And yeah, I think this looks really nice, really summery, a proper holiday ATC and greeting card. If you like these two cards, you might want to give me a thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more of what I'm creating, you might want to subscribe to my channel. I'd be very happy about that. And I'll see you soon with another video.